Let me ask you guys something. Do you believe in miracles? Do you believe in magic? The magic number for the Devils to officially punch their ticket to the playoffs down to one. All they have to do is beat the Buffalo Sabres. And this means a lot, obviously, to a lot of people. But we're going to talk more about it in today's episode of Locked On Devils. Buckle up, everybody.
You're Locked On Devils, your daily podcast on the New Jersey Devils. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hi, this is Bryce Salvador, and you're Locked On Devils with Trey Matthews.
Elliott scores! Oh, Steven stepped up, nailed it. Brodor's got the puck. What a shot. The Devils win the Stanley Cup.
Alrighty now, what is up, New Jersey? Welcome back to the Locked On Devils podcast here on the Locked On Network. I'm your host, college hockey play-by-play announcer, Devils writer for Pucks and Pitchforks, and also part-time credential media member, Trey Matthews. If you missed yesterday's episode, I had the chance to interview the incredible Amanda Stein. So she answered some of the questions that you guys sent in. We talked about her career, getting her start in Montreal, then working her way over to the Garden State. So it was an absolute joy to interview Amanda. Hope to have her back on the show at some point in the future, but you guys obviously know where to find her work. Now, let's talk about the Stanley Cup playoffs, because after the Florida Panthers game, the New Jersey Devils can officially punch their ticket into the playoffs if they win against the Buffalo Sabres tonight. So it's just a surreal feeling to realize that the New Jersey Devils are going back to the playoffs, and I think they have a chance to be somewhat competitive, especially after getting Timo Meier. So obviously there's a lot of people who have contributed to the success of the New Jersey Devils, and I wrote down some of the key figures that we should be giving a lot of credit to. So obviously going to the playoffs means a lot to the fan base, because let's face it, sometimes we're not the best fans in the world. Sometimes people just say like we're one of the worst fan bases, we're this, we're that. I always say that the New Jersey Devils discourse are just a bunch of passionate people who love the sport of hockey, who just want nothing more than success from their team. And let's face it, a lot of East Coast teams, they're not really given the benefit of the doubt. So go up to Boston, New York, Philadelphia, wherever the case might be. East Coast fans are usually given a bad rep, but in the words of Lindy Ruff, the Devils fan base is just a bunch of passionate people. So we're going to go over some people who are also passionate and have contributed to the Devils' success. So the first one being, let's start with the general manager, and that is Tom Fitzgerald. So what does clinching a playoff spot mean for Tom Fitzgerald? I think it just proves that he's an absolute genius. So Amanda actually touched on it during our interview in yesterday's episode, because she said that Tom Fitzgerald took the blueprints from Ray Shero and was just able to blossom it in more ways than one. And when he was the interim GM and then later hired as the full-time replacement, we just saw Tom Fitzgerald get to work right away. It was a gradual buildup. So obviously, during the 2020 NHL draft, the Devils had 3 first-round picks, and I think they made the most of those 3 picks, because you got Alexander Holtz, and Holtz obviously hasn't really developed in the way that we want him to at the NHL level, but we know that his potential is there given how well he can perform at the AHL. So I think Alexander Holtz, just give him a year or two, get him a skating coach. I think he'll be just fine. And then for someone like Dawson Mercer, we've already seen him take leaps and bounds of improvement. We've seen him contribute a bunch on the top 6, especially on that top line of Nico Hischier and Tomas Tatar. So Dawson Mercer going on that point streak. I think Mercer, he's got next. And quite honestly, I could be considering him as a part of that band of Hughes, Hischier, Bratt, and now Meier, because Mercer has impressed me. And I just said for Mercer, he's a dog. He was the only Devils player to play in all 82 games last year. And now at this point of the year, he's been a great contributor on the offensive side of things. And that's clear as day. So Dawson Mercer was definitely a big pickup in the NHL draft. And then Shakir McCalmadulin, he was obviously used as that pawn piece in the Timo Meier deal. So Tom Fitzgerald was able to, like I said, make the most of the 2020 NHL draft. And during the course of the offseason, it wasn't really the most eventful offseason for the Devils. I think the main storyline was that they got Corey Crawford, and unfortunately, Corey Crawford retired abruptly before the start of the season. So that was a little disappointing to see. Obviously, they got like people like Ryan Murray, they got Andreas Johnson, but that offseason was not really eventful for the Devils aside from making some front office changes and obviously hiring Lindy Ruff. But that's not where the story ends for Tom Fitzgerald, obviously, because the very next offseason, what does he do? He gets right to work once again, and he built a solid foundation for Devils. So starting off in the 2021 NHL draft, who does he draft? He drafted the little brother of Jack Hughes, and we know his name, Luke Hughes, and he's been performing well at the University of Michigan. He's been performing well for Team USA. So I think Luke Hughes definitely has next in terms of young blue liners that can contribute at the NHL level. So Tom Fitzgerald, that was a great addition for the Devils organization and their prospect pipeline. So I'm not just saying that because that's Jack Hughes' little brother. Luke Hughes is the real deal. He has to work on his defense a little bit, but if he turns out to be like Dougie Hamilton, obviously he doesn't have the size of Dougie Hamilton, but still just contribute on the offensive side of things and work on your defense a little bit, I think Luke Hughes will be just fine. But let's talk about that offseason, 2021. So what did the Devils need? I said, get a big name player, get a solid contributor on the top six, get a backup goalie. So who does he get? He gets Dougie Hamilton. I believe Dougie Hamilton was the biggest name free agent available because Dougie Hamilton was a finalist for the Norris Trophy with the Carolina Hurricanes just that past season. And he locked him up long term. Dougie Hamilton was rumored to go to the Devils. And I even did a silly season episode surrounding Dougie Hamilton and the possibility of him joining the Devils organization. And I was like, okay, that's a huge pickup for Tom Fitzgerald. He gets Tomas Tatar. And I know Tomas Tatar was pretty much a non-factor on the Montreal Canadiens when they went to the Stanley Cup Finals. However, he did lead the Canadiens in scoring not too long ago. So I was like, okay, solid contributor, can play on the top six, he can play on the bottom six, but he provides some more scoring options for the Devils. They get a backup goalie, Jonathan Bernier, before his hip surgery. Jonathan Bernier, I said, like, past champion, brings the experience, can act as a mentor towards Mackenzie Blackwood. So I was really excited for the Jonathan Bernier addition. Obviously, didn't really pan out. And then what happened come the season, I was like, okay, if all goes well for the Devils, I think they could be a dark horse team. Do I think they can make the playoffs? No, but I think they could play meaningful games come February or March. That didn't happen. Obviously, Jack Hughes got hurt second game of the year against the Seattle Kraken. He ended up getting hurt later in the year. So Jack Hughes was out for a significant amount of time. He played in like just a little over half the games. Nico Hischier was dealing with something. I think Jesper Bratt missed some time. Obviously, COVID restrictions were still pretty strict during last season. So Tom Fitzgerald and Lindy Ruff weren't really set up for the best of success during the course of that season. So I was just like, okay, I think come next year, the offseason, whatever the case might be, I think Devils will do better. However, they didn't get the big name players, but they were able to get some solid contributors. Once again, you got Andre Palat, you got Eric Haula, you got Brendan Smith, you got John Marino. Obviously, you drafted Shimon Nemeth. Tom Fitzgerald didn't sip the Kool-Aid. He elected to draft what the Devils needed, not the best name player available. So Shane Wright was available on the board, obviously. Then so was Logan Cooley, but the Devils elected to go for Shimon Nemeth, a defenseman. I think that was a smart move. So that offseason for the Devils, even though it wasn't the most exciting offseason amongst the NHL, the Devils still got better by default. And then that obviously contributed to them winning 13 straight games, having a successful first half of the year. Jack Hughes blossoms into an all-star. Nico Hischier is a great leader. Jesper Bratt is a solid contributor as well. And being a sort of a point-per-game player, Devils become buyers, and then they get that big-name player in Timo Meier. So Tom Fitzgerald is the epitome of trusting the process. He's an absolute genius. Like Amanda said in the previous episode, just sticking to the plan and just taking the blueprints from Ray Shero and was able to make it his own in more ways than one. Now, speaking of offseason moves that Tom Fitzgerald made, let's talk about probably his biggest offseason move, his first year as full-time GM for a Devils organization. That was Lindy Ruff. A lot of people doubted Lindy Ruff. We heard the fire Lindy chants earlier this year at the Prudential Center, but Lindy Ruff stuck to it as well. I said, give Lindy Ruff a chance. I think Lindy Ruff is a good coach. Obviously, he's on the other side of his better days. Early on in his coaching tenure, he had better winning ways, but still, I was like, Lindy Ruff is still, he just needs to be put into a good situation in order to succeed, because I think just with the injuries, the COVID restrictions, whatever the case might be, didn't really give Lindy Ruff that chance to succeed as a head coach. So I was like, okay, this year you can hold him to a shorter leash. Obviously, you got Andrew Burnett, right there on the bench. So in case things do go south, you can just thrust Andrew Brunette into the head coaching position, and you already got another good head coach in the pipeline. So if the Lindy Ruff experiment fails, at least you can sleep well at night knowing you got Andrew Brunette. So I think for Lindy Ruff and what clinching a playoff spot means for him, I think he might get extended. He might retire. I don't know. It's Lindy Ruff's call, because don't quote me on this. I think this is the final year of his contract. So I'm still like wondering, like, what are the Devils going to do with Lindy Ruff, or what does Lindy Ruff want for himself? Is he going to retire? Does he want to sign another extension, whatever the case might be? Because I always said that Lindy Ruff was a for now head coach, and I thought that the Devils were like getting ready for Andrew Brunette. They were just trying to gear him up, and he was just trying to get the experience from Lindy Ruff behind the bench, whatever the case might be. But Lindy Ruff, quite honestly, he's exceeded the expectations. He's brought this team to new heights. So it's just like, what are the Devils going to do with Lindy Ruff now? I think they could still extend him, but for how long? That's my question. Like, how much more gas does Lindy Ruff have in the tank? Like, does he want to go another 3 years? Is it going to be like a 1 or a 2 year extension, or does he just want to stop in general? So that's an interesting question, and I love Lindy Ruff. I love what he's done to the organization, quite honestly, and I was one of the few people who said, do not fire Lindy. Just keep giving him a chance and trusting in him. And it's panned out so far. So once he was given that opportunity to succeed, you saw the players, especially on the offensive side of things, they've gotten much better. So it hasn't been perfect, but it's definitely been better than past years, obviously. So for Lindy Ruff, I think he has to put his retirement plans on the back burner and basically seriously consider maybe getting another extension with the Devils. I think it's going to be up to him at this point. I'm sure Tom Fitzgerald would still like to have Lindy Ruff around, but it is a topic that we need to discuss once the season comes to an end, obviously after the playoffs. Okay, so we talked about Tom Fitzgerald. We talked about Lindy Ruff. Let's talk about our offensive juggernauts, our baby big three. Okay, look, I know some of you don't like it when I call them the baby big three. Even Jersey Joe says he doesn't like it. So I guess I got to stop calling them that, especially now that Timo Meier's added to the mix. So Timo Meier is still relatively new to the Devils organization, so I'm not going to include him when discussing the other players. But yeah, I guess I could call him the four-headed monster or something like that. But anyway, our original trio on the offensive side of things, Jack Hughes, Nico Hischier, Jesper Bratt. What does this mean for all three of them? So for Jack Hughes, I think Jack Hughes is primed to possibly have a better chance of winning the Hart Memorial Trophy come next year. Because I said for this year, my goal for Jack Hughes was to possibly get 100 points. I don't think he's going to get there. I said if he gets in that ballpark and stays healthy, I think you would have to put him into the MVP discussions because he's having a Taylor Hall type of year. And speaking of which, Amanda also touched on this in our interview yesterday. She said she feels as though this team, obviously led by Nico Hischier, the captain, is just bound for more success compared to the Taylor Hall-led team that made the playoffs a few years ago. And she says that's not a knock at Taylor Hall. She just says that this roster is just more filled out. Obviously, Jack Hughes, Nico Hischier, Jesper Bratt, now Timo Meier, still relatively young, and they have their whole careers ahead of them. And Vitek Vanacek, he's putting up like Martin Brodeur kind of numbers. So it's just like this team probably has a better chance of succeeding in the playoffs compared to that Taylor Hall-led team. But I digress a little bit. Jack Hughes, I think come next year, barring a Connor McDavid topping this season, whatever the case might be, I think MVP is going to be in Jack Hughes' sights because I think he could get over 100 points, not this year, but next year. I think he could stay healthy, and I think he could still lead the Devils in more ways than one. I think he's only scratching the surface. And look, I'm putting him at a different standard because he's our franchise piece. But Jack Hughes, if the Devils once the Devils make the playoffs, I no longer have to say if. Once they make the playoffs, I think people are definitely going to be turning their heads at that kid at the Prudential Center and just say, Jack Hughes, he's the reason why the Devils are going to the playoffs. He's the reason why they're getting all these goals. He's the reason why they have not gotten shut out this year. Fun fact for you. So I think Jack Hughes is definitely in a better position to win MVP come next year, especially once the Devils clinch a playoff spot. For Nico Hischier, it proves that he's a great leader. Because remember, Nico Hischier, people were questioning, like, why was he named captain at such a young age? Having spoken to him in the locker room, I could see why he is the captain and why he drives that ship for the Devils, because he's just so knowledgeable, but at the same time, he's so soft-spoken, he's so polite, but he's assertive as well. That's just based on the interactions I've had with him. I've had the chance to speak with them 2 or 3 times, but Nico Hischier, just a great captain, and I think he's starting to show, like, look, I could still be a superstar in this league, because some people are saying Nico Hischier and superstar mixing, they felt as though that ship has sailed. Now, is he a superstar currently? I wouldn't go that far, but he's definitely in that ballpark. He's in that realm. He's not too far off. So I think for Nico Hischier, he's a great two-way player, a great center, and obviously he's one of our main weapons, and he's been clutch this year. CLUTCH, Captain Clutch. So Nico Hischier, I think he's just proving why he was the first overall pick and why people like just want to make those idiotic comments or naysayers, whatever the case might be, saying like, oh, Nico Hischier, he's a bust, or Nico Hischier, he wasn't worth the first overall pick. He's saying F that. I wish I could cuss on this show, but I'll get in trouble with the network. But Nico Hischier, I think superstar, not too far off, guys. He just a late bloomer. And remember, he's dealt with injury and he's dealt with COVID-plagued seasons, which hasn't helped him as well, similar to Lindy Ruff. So just saying, Jesper Bratt, the best player in the NHL, wouldn't go that far. Sorry, Brat Pack. But Jesper Bratt being a point-per-game player for a good chunk of the season, I still think Jesper Bratt could become an all-star. He just has to be a little more consistent, and he can't rely on the advanced analytics to bail him out. But Jesper Bratt, I think he's starting to turn heads just a little bit more. Can he be a superstar in this league? Probably not. But at the same time, he's definitely a great player to have on our roster. And he's definitely a good guy to turn to if Jack Hughes is struggling or Nico Hischier is struggling. At least we can rely on one of those 3 players to give us something on the offensive side of things. And it's another reason why, once again, why the Devils have not been shut out this season. Because you can rely on Jack Hughes, you can rely on Nico Hischier, you can rely on Jesper Bratt. What does it mean to all 3 of them? It means that Jack Hughes, he could possibly have a better chance of winning MVP. Nico Hischier proves he's a great leader, and he could still be a superstar in this league, leading this team or helping Jack Hughes lead this team to the playoffs. And then the same for Jesper Bratt, helping Nico Hischier and Jack Hughes lead this team to the playoffs as well. Jesper Bratt is sort of that he's sort of that underrated player. He falls into the shadow of Jack Hughes and Nico just a little bit, but it's just like, hey, don't let that fool you. Jesper Bratt is still a great player on this roster. So great forwards to have and great leaders. And once again, it's one of the reasons why I said last year, I said, if the Devils can just improve on their goaltending and defense, I think they will have a good chance of being one of the top offenses in the league. And people will realize it more because last year, Devils could score like 5 goals quite frequently, but it didn't matter if they gave up 6 or 7. So just putting that out there. Now, clinching a playoff spot means a lot to a certain amount of people. And I'm not trying to sound arrogant or anything of that nature, but someone asked me on Twitter, like, what was my prediction going into the regular season? Like, where did I say the Devils would finish? So I'm going to talk about that momentarily. But before we get into it, I need to tell you guys about Indeed. No matter how the last game went, anytime you take the field, you've got a shot at greatness. Give your team the best shot at winning by recruiting more MVPs with Indeed. If you're hiring, you need Indeed, because Indeed is a hiring partner where you can attract, interview, and hire all in one place. And Indeed is the only job site where you're guaranteed to find quality applicants that meet your must-have requirements, or else you don't pay. Instead of spending hours on multiple job sites hoping to find candidates with the right skills, you need one powerful hiring partner that can help do it all. So get on the winning team and join Indeed. So start hiring right now with a $75 sponsored job credit to upgrade your job post at Indeed.com/lockedon. Offer valid through March 31st. Go to Indeed.com/lockedon to reclaim your $75 credit before March 31st. Indeed.com, once again, /lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed. Speaking of hiring means money. Well, I want you guys to make some extra money. Head over to FanDuel. The tournament is heating up, and there's no better place to get in the action than FanDuel, baby. America's #1 sportsbook. March Madness is awesome, baby. That's because right now, FanDuel is giving new customers a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's up to $1,000 back in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. Just go to FanDuel.com/lockedon and sign up today to claim your no-sweat first bet. Then you can wager on everything from money line to point spreads to which team will be cutting down the net, all on an app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use. So don't miss your shot at a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 when you join FanDuel today. Just go to FanDuel.com/lockedon to sign up. Make every moment more with FanDuel. March Madness is awesome, baby. Okay, so what does the Devils clinching a playoff spot mean for me personally? So the reason I thought about this is because someone, like I said before the break, someone reached out to me on Twitter and asked me, like, what was my predictions going into the season? Now, I look back at the episode that I published in late August after the mock draft courtesy of Locked On was released, in which all the Locked On hosts of the NHL branch gave their thoughts as to how the Metro would shake up. So the givens were, they said, like, the Carolina Hurricanes were number 1. I think the New York Rangers were number 2. Pittsburgh Penguins were number 3. And then 4 through 7 was basically a coin flip for some people. And then the last place team that everyone had was the Philadelphia Flyers. So I personally, during my mock draft, I put the Devils at number 1. Not because I genuinely thought that they can finish number 1. I even said in the episode that I'm not delusional, but I just wanted to give the Devils a little bit more traction because I was like, look, I don't think the Devils are going to be a bottom tier team in the Metro. I think that they could be a solid playoff team, but all would have to go right for them. They're going to have to stay healthy, and the pieces that they were able to get during the course of the offseason, they're going to have to pan out as well. So I said Andre Palat's going to have to pan out. We're going to have to see what Eric Holla does. Vitek Vanecek, can he be that good goalie alongside with Mackenzie Blackwood? And he was able to answer that question. So I basically just wanted to give the New Jersey Devils a chance, but end all be all, when looking at the mock draft for Locked On, people had the Devils second to last. However, people did say, well, maybe I would flip the Devils and the Islanders. So they would have the Devils, the third last team, and then Islanders, and then Flyers. And then some people were just like, I was just really stumped through 4 through 7. So they decided to just, since the Columbus Blue Jackets got Johnny Gaudreau, since the Islanders and Capitals have obviously been to the playoffs in more recent years, they didn't give the Devils the benefit of the doubt. And I get it. But I just said, like, I think the Devils could surprise people in more ways than one. So when looking back at that episode, when looking back at my prediction, I said I think the Devils can get either the 3rd or the 4th spot in the Metro. And obviously the 4th spot, it would be like a wild card circumstance. So I was like, the Devils are either going to be one of the top teams in the Metro, like I said 3rd, so because I said my givens were the Carolina Hurricanes and New York Rangers. So I said Devils can compete for 3rd, or they could compete for a wild card position. So I was genuinely, I was definitely riding with the Devils. Someone did challenge me and said, like, well, what about the Washington Capitals? If you had to choose, would you say Devils or Capitals? And I said, okay, if I had something to lose, I would say Capitals, but I still think the Devils can be a dark horse playoff team, because I was just like, look, I don't care if they make the playoffs. I don't care if they miss the playoffs. I just said, in the month of March, in the month of February, whatever the case might be, can the Devils play meaningful games? Because can they sort of be like what the Ottawa Senators are right now, or the Pittsburgh Penguins, which is they're just playing down to the wire. They're relying on other teams to help them with their outcomes, so that way they can try to punch their ticket into the playoffs. I didn't anticipate for the Devils to be this good, but I said playoff team, wild card team, or fringe playoff team, like maybe a team that just misses it by the skin of their teeth. So I wish I was a little more confident in my pick. And now the Devils just clinching the playoff spot. It just means a lot, because this is the first time that I get to cover the Devils during the course of the playoffs during my tenure here at Locked On. And a lot of people were counting out the Devils. Sometimes I got some slack for being, I guess, quote unquote, overly optimistic about my team, and just maybe being a little too sensitive about them, whatever the case might be. But I don't care. I'm a passionate fan. I'm passionate at what I do. And, you know, I really believed in the Devils. And I get that their offseason didn't go as planned, but they still got better by default. And that was my mindset. So it means a lot to me, just in the sense that I think I I was somewhat confident in the Devils. I was just like, I have a good feeling. And I wish I wish my confidence was just a little higher during that time. But now reflecting on it now, I'm glad that I didn't doubt on the Devils. I'm glad I didn't fall into the trap and just say Devils are going to be a bottom tier team, because the one thing I said was, like, when you look at a team like the New York Islanders, when you look at a team like the Washington Capitals or the Pittsburgh Penguins, they're one of the oldest teams in the NHL. And Father Time is defeated for a reason. So I was just like, I have respect for the Penguins organization for keeping their big three together in Letang, Malkin, and obviously Crosby. But they've won their Stanley Cups. They're getting older. They're on the other side of their better days. They can't keep at it forever. And then for the Capitals, I was just like, yes, you have one of the top players to ever play in Alexander Ovechkin, but can he will his team to victory? Because the Capitals are a team full of veterans. I was like, can the Devils just outmuscle them? And then for the Columbus Blue Jackets, with all due respect, I thought that they were always overhyped, because I was like, okay, Johnny Gaudreau will do his thing. And I was surprised that they were able to keep Patrick Laine on their team. Obviously, you got Elvis Merzlikins, but I was just like, I think that they're the second youngest team in the NHL. They're going to hit a wall. The youngest team in the NHL currently, I believe, is the Buffalo Sabres. And after that, it's the Columbus Blue Jackets. So I was like, Johnny Gaudreau will do his thing. Not worried about Johnny Gaudreau. He can go off and, rack up the points, whatever the case might be. But I was just like, they're going to hit a wall. And I'm just speaking from experience. I wasn't being bitter. I wasn't being petty. It was just the Devils were one time the youngest team in the NHL just a few years ago. In fact, they're still one of the youngest teams in the NHL, but they've gone up a few spots. But my thing was, like, just speaking from experience, I think the Columbus Blue Jackets are going to hit a wall, and I don't think they're going to be as good as people projected them to be. So Johnny Gaudreau is a huge sign for them. Don't get me wrong, but they're still young. You can't take away from that fact. And those young guys, they just hit that wall early. And now the Columbus Blue Jackets, bottom tier in the Metro. So just means a lot to me, just because I get to cover the Devils after 82 games. It's gonna be a breath of fresh air. I'm excited. I'm nervous, and obviously, I hope to have some big guests on. And I hope once my semester wraps up, maybe I could get credentialed and go to the Prudential Center to watch. I'm sure a lot of you are gonna be like, "Please don't go to the Prudential Center. Please don't," because there's this notion saying I'm a curse. But nonetheless, going to the playoffs, guys, amazing, and they can do it tonight against the Buffalo Sabres, or the Buffalo Sabres, as some people have been calling them, because obviously it's a joke because you got the San Diego Padres who spell their name similarly. But anyway, let me know what you guys think. Devils clinching a playoff spot. What does that mean to you? And what does that mean to maybe some other people on the Devils roster or front office that I probably have missed? So leave a comment down below if you're watching on YouTube. If you're listening on podcast streaming service, hit me up on my personal Twitter page at TreyMatt4 or the show's Twitter page at Locked On Devils. As for this episode, that's all the time I have for you. So continue to stay safe. Have a wonderful day, New Jersey. Go Devils. I'll catch you guys in the next episode. Thanks for listening once again.